All right, welcome. This is going to be our block of instruction that what we're going to be giving. It's going to be concerning BMI and the tapering process, and we're going to be centered around how it works in the Army regulations. The Army Regulation for it is Army Regulation 600-9, but it is important to remember that what we're going to be discussing about does flow over into the other branches of service. The Navy and the Air Force both have a method of doing this, and they incorporate it more into their PT test and to their actual testing individuals. The Marines and the Army both have more of a standalone in which they're able to utilize it themselves, but that's what we're going to be talking about today, and this class is really broken down into three parts. The first part, for anybody that's watched our content that we have up here, we always break it down as if you are a leader talking to an individual who who has this problem walking in there. So what are you doing to say to them? What's the discussions that you need to have? So that's going to be the first block of instruction. The next block of instruction, I actually teach and certify the people who do the taping at one of the NCUA schoolhouses. So we're going to go through the actual class that we give them. Like, this is how we teach tapers in order to do this. So that way you're familiar with what they're looking for, what are the landmarks, how they're filling out the forms, that way that you're up to date on it. And the last part of it is whenever you go through any type of taping procedures, you're going to have to, there's going to be an NCUIC, an OIC, an individual in charge of this to make sure that it was done in accordance with how it's supposed to be done. And what are they really looking for? What is the roles or responsibilities of that individual that's in charge of actually performing a height and weight check across the board? So the first thing we want to start off with is we're going to go over the actual ABCP system, right? What is its existence for? Why is it important? There are numerous people out there, and you can find them all over the place, who like to regularly state that the standards outlined in Army Regulation 600-9, the Army Body Composition Program, or how we choose to determine whether somebody's overweight or not, is invalid, and it's an inaccurate system. One of the key things that I like to point out to people as we're going through this class and as we're going through the block of instruction is to understand that whenever we talk about the Army regulation system and we talk about being able to determine whether somebody's actually overweight or not, if the Army really wanted to test, if the military really wanted to test to see whether it was true that you were actually overweight, right, or if your body fat index was so far overweight that you could not serve, they would be having, it would be part of your annual screening, annual checkup. Whenever you go to a medical professional, there would be a whole different group of systems that were there in place for it. So the point of the ABC system, or the height and weight system, is not to check to make sure that your body fat is out of any type of standard that it needs to be. Rather, there needs to be this understanding that people have to sacrifice a lot of their health, mentally and physically, and to sometimes of that poor habits, in order for completion mission, or for them to be able to go through the steps necessary for them to be able to advance their career. And whenever they do that, there is that sacrifice that they give of their time and their body that can sometimes result in poor eating habits, weight gain, and can allow them to fall within unhealthy standards of what we see statistically people should be. And it's important that commanders have soldiers that are able to go forth and make that sacrifice for the completing the mission or being able to advance their military career. But it's also important that they're able to identify whenever people have developed bad habits to the point that they need to be allowed to go off and address those and be able to fix them. That's the real point of what the Army's height and weight standards is trying to weed out. Who are the individuals who can no longer sacrifice for the completion of a mission of their career or their career advancement, and instead they need to have some time put into addressing their behaviors and improving their discipline and getting back in good physical fitness and shape, right? That's one of the big things that we want people to take away as we're going through this. Yes, you do need to be physically fit in order to have a lot of these professions, for police, military, and firefighters. You do need to be physically fit for this, and that matters. And there are going to be times that you have to sacrifice, have poor sleep habits, to have poor eating habits in order to complete what a commander has told you to do. But it's also important that whenever you fall outside of those acceptable standards in which we know that you're starting to flow into high risk, that the military provides you the chance, or the services provide you the chance to address and go those behavior change. One of the key values that we preach and talk about as our gyms and any of our talks is the number one indicator of good health, mentally or physically, is behavior change. That's a period at the end of the statement. If you can recognize the fact that there's behavioral change that you need to have, that there's elements in your life that you need to change, and that you can actually have the wherewithal to step forward and make those changes, then nobody can describe you as unhealthy, right? Then you are a solidly healthy person because you can change to adapt to the environments and situations that you find yourself in. And the Army wants to continually make sure, the military wants to continually make sure that that skill and strength, in order for you to change those behaviors, to adapt to any situation that it might put you in out there in the future, those skills stay sharpened, right? So that's one of the big key points of why we want to talk about why 600-9 exists, why these things actually exist, so commanders can take care of their troops and know whenever it's time to help that troop focus on their own physical health. As we go do this, we do want to point out the Army's never kicked anybody out for failing to meet height and weight standards. That's not the way it goes. The Army kicks people out because they refuse to make those changes. If you're told that you need to make a lifestyle change, if you're told that these things need to change in your life in order for you to stay with the profession or to continue to be able to serve or do your job, and your answer is, no, I'm not going to change, then in that situation, they do have every right to say, if you don't want to change, then maybe this isn't the profession for you anymore. But thank you for what you've done for us, right? That's complete within the right. But if you're willing to change, and this is the way that the Army regulations are written on it, inside of it, there is no set time frame that says that you have to be able to get back within any type of standards in any point of time. Rather, as long as you continually to show change and growth and moving towards it, we're going to allow you all the time to do that, because there's situations where people have really went outside of because they haven't got tested for a long time, because of the sacrifice they've had to make in order for the mission and the commands, they now have a lot of excessive body weight. But as long as they're willing to stick to this in order to get to the point that they do lose the body weight that they need to be within it, the Army's going to give them all the time that they need to do this, as long as they're willing to continue to progress and get better. Right. So moving into the methods that the military uses to check this, there is primarily one method currently that's authorized, and this is what we refer to as a circumference test. Right? And that's where they actually go through and use a tape, and they perform it on males. They check 2 body parts. Females, they check 3 different body parts. They go through and they check those, and they have a formula to which they put it in, so that way they can roughly determine what your BMI is. The other 2 ways that you primarily see out in the world today is you'll see what's referred to as air displacement, or sometimes called the bipod. This is another method that you'll see utilized a lot in order for them to get a gauge of what your BMI index is. But bipod is actually a very inaccurate method of actually determining what somebody's overall BMI is, and tape is just slightly ahead of it, right, as far as it. Generally, pinch testing, skin fold testing tends to roughly be recognized as the most accurate way to determine what somebody's true BMI index is. The only issue that exists between the tape and a skin fold is there is a higher degree of human error that is required in order for them to actually be able to obtain what the correct BMI index is for a person, right? That's just the way that the systems work. There's less human error involved whenever you go down to air displacement. So can these things truly tell you whether you're at 24 or 28%? Not very accurately. They can't really capture it. But the one thing that all 3 of these that I just mentioned do a very good job of is being able to track your change over time. So if you do come in at 28% and over the course of the next 3 months, you really have lost 4% body fat, it is debatable whether you started at 28% or you started at 27% or 26%. That is debatable until the end of time. But if you were taped consistently through there and continually to be measured through, and that tape is reflecting that you've lost 3% body fat, it's going to be pretty accurate that you have really lost 3% body fat. That's a pretty lockdown guaranteed, and that's across all of them, whether it be bipod, whether it be the tape, whether it be the skin fold caliper. It will very accurately catch whichever one it's going through. So I've seen a few questions roll through. The way that we do our classes here, whenever we do them, whenever we outline the criteria on it, right? Thank you very much for the questions. We really appreciate it, and we're going to answer it. But we will, whenever we transition, we'll stop and pause for a minute to go questions. We'll go back and get some of them at that time. But after that whole little spill I got, Yeah, that's actually a really good question. We're going to cover that subject. Please just hold on here. But we're going to go over, as an NCO, as a leader, right now we're going to go over how you need to talk to that individual who just got told that they are having to enroll in the Army Body Composition program, or their career is threatened because they are not within the height and weight standards that they need to in order to progress on. Whenever we want to sit down and have a conversation with them about it, it's important to realize that there's 4 people who work together as a team to improve somebody's overall physical or mental health. Right? And the first thing, the most important person that's involved in this whole situation, whenever you're trying to, as a leader or an individual, address or change somebody's overall health, is the mentor, the guide, the person that's going to be there to listen to them to go through all this. That's going to be the most important person in all this. Your baggage is not attached to their success or failure, right? And sometimes they just need a chance to talk to somebody who is, has another level of disconnect from this whole situation. So I want to point out that if somebody's coming out and talking to you about their enrollment in this program, then you have now become part of the team that's going to be guiding them through this journey to help them get back within it. The other people that play an important role in part of this team, the first question that we want to have answered whenever somebody comes over and sits down and says, I'm overweight, I need help with this, is the question above the neck or below? Is the problem above the neck or below the neck? That's the first thing that we really want to determine. Yes, mental health plays a huge role in a lot of people's weight gain. And that needs to be understood that sometimes putting people in caloric deficits and making them starve themselves and going out and doing massive amounts of physical training is not going to result in them actually losing weight, because the issue that has caused them to be able to gain weight is with how they're choosing to react and the relationship behaviors that they have with food. If food is serving another purpose in their life other than just trying to fuel their body, then this is something that we need to identify and that we need to start actually working with. It's very easy for food to become a very unhealthy vice really quick. If food is a coping mechanism for other issues that have occurred, if it's a way for you to deal with stress, if it's a way that if you lack the ability to be able to distinguish what type of signal that your body is giving you after you eat, right? If that's an unhealthy relationship that exists between it, going to a personal trainer or going over to see a dietitian or a nutritionist, they're going to be poorly equipped to be able to deal with that situation and be able to help people and help that person to find a way to find new and better vices to deal with the situations that they have. A lot of therapists, as we move into mental health, they a very common diagnosis that they'll give out is just a change disorder, to where this person's trying to change, they're not doing it very well, and as a mental health professional, I'm going to provide them guidance and a path through in order for them to change into the person that they want to become. I really want to point out and make sure that it is understood that mental health professionals can play a very critical role in helping people through their weight loss journey or helping people through their fitness journey. They can be just as vital important as anybody else. And I've already told you the other 2 people who play a role in helping somebody through this. Remember, there's 4 people who play a role in helping somebody through their fitness journey. The next 2 people that are in it are, a dietitian or nutrition. They're generally the same thing. There is some 2 differences between those professions, but they play a role in helping somebody actually be able to do it. And their goal is to help somebody realize how much food they actually need to eat, how much food they actually need to eat in order to perform the activities that they want. Help them understand what the feeling of fullness is, right? A lot of people don't realize that they can stop eating whenever they're over at the table. Their body has all the fuel that it needs, that they can stand up and walk away. And those 2 professions do a really good job at helping somebody realize and understand how much food they don't need to eat, or on the other hand, what foods they need to be eating. The last person that plays a role in helping somebody throughout their fitness journey tends to be in the physical fitness industry, whether it be a trainer, a physical therapist, anybody inside there. And they really serve two main roles inside of this journey for people. And if you're sitting in front of them, this is the big thing that we want them to communicate over to them, is that one, a lot of people need a plan in order for them to be able to go through this journey. That's a very important thing. And they need to have a plan based on activities that they enjoy, that they want to go out and participate in. Because the number one thing that results in weight loss is intensity. If they have something that they enjoy doing, something that they can put intensity towards, then that journey becomes a much easier for them to go on, right? Even if it's not the best workout in order for them to be able to go lose weight at max. It doesn't matter if they're able to put forth max intensity towards this thing that they like going out and doing every day. They're much more likely to stay with the plan. And the second reason is because this is where injury prevention occurs at. It's good to have trainers around in some aspect as we're talking about improving on somebody's fitness journey, because they play a vital role of ensuring that the journey is not sidetracked through injury, right? They can make sure that the past injuries that somebody has is correctly addressed and does not prevent them from being able to continue on the journey. And it will also ensure that while they're on this journey, that there won't be injuries caused on the way that could, completely side rail this injury as they're going through. But it's important to understand that the person at the middle of all this is going to be that leader or mentor or somebody who's sitting across, who's responsible for that individual to help them guide through and go all the way through this. That needs to be on the other side, so that way it can say, you know what, I think we need to go sit down and let's get an appointment with a therapist so we can get you to sit down and talk through about how your behaviors work with food. Let's go get you to sit down with a nutritionist so that way we can get you on a diet plan to really do a good job fueling the activities that you want to do. Let's go sit down and talk to a trainer so that way, hey, you really like basketball, we can get you a training plan so that way you can get better at basketball so you can play more basketball, so we can get you to the point that you're able to be back within the standards that you need to be in a quicker, faster, more efficient manner. Right, so those are the people that need to be around him, and make sure that leader, that person's in front of him that's responsible. Make sure that they're the ones actually leading the conversation on it. I want to point out that with my experience across, I did serve 15 years active military, and I've been in the reserve ever since. This is where one of the bigger failures that exist across military forces. My time working with some of the Navy and some of the Air Force and submarines. In the Marines, this is where some of their biggest fault actually occurs at. They try to blunt instrument this stuff in order to get them to where they want. Oh, you're overweight? Well, they're just going to go out and do remedial PT until you puke and you get back within the standards which you need to be. And as we just outlined, sometimes there's mental health issues. Sometimes there's a relationship with food. Sometimes there is physical fitness issues that are associated with this, right? So being able to look to see which one actually needs to be addressed in order to improve it, that's where we need to go. And so let's talk about we're going to transition over here in just a minute to how we actually certify and go through the taping and the height and weight table process. So if anybody has any questions here, go ahead and put them up. And we're going to go back and answer this one about the AM51. I'm 150 pounds. My unit is still yelling at me about being within height and weight standards. I would to outline in the scenario that you've put there. Why are they yelling at you about passing tape, right? Is it because they don't see a plan of action in order for you to get from where you're at to where they want you to be? Is it because they're just a bunch of selfish pricks? Is it what's the issue to why they're still harping on to you about that, right? Go back and look into that and see what it is. Is it because you don't have a plan? Is it because that the plan that they wanting you on is not the right one that suits you, right? So where's the issue inside of it as far as whether doing it? And I would strongly encourage you, this is my advice to you, is to sit down with somebody and talk to a friend or an ally, somebody who is not involved with your unit, and get their other respect on what your plan ahead should be, right? Just a good sounding board to bounce those off of and say, you know what, this is the path forward I'm going to move forward with. I will tell you that most senior non-commissioned officers that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout my military career, whenever they see the plan for how a person's going to get from A to Z, right? Once they see that plan and they feel that it's something acceptable, they're much more likely to buy on and support that individual and plan as they move forward, right? What happens whenever you get flagged? You're barred from reenlistment. to part of the, okay, so bar from reenlistment is not meant to be a negative action. It's meant to be something that provides you another data point or another way to provide you some motivation in order for you to actually try to correct the situation that you're in. Okay? They are not meant to be bad things. Listen, getting flagged and getting barred from reenlistment are things that could disappear just as quickly as they appeared. But a commander does have the obligation. It is part of their command that if you are outside of these standards, right, that this is what they have to do. Right, so that's the actions that they have to take, and it's meant to be there so that if you're, I'm not going to go down that road, right? That's what it's meant to be there for. So that way they can provide you another source of motivation to try to get to go through on it, right? What happens whenever you get flagged, barred from reenlistment? They won't. How soon can you get unflagged? As soon as you are within the standards. On that note, how soon, we're going to be moving on after this question. How soon can you get unflagged? As soon as you're within standards, your unit can submit the paperwork to have your flag removed, right? It may take them 1 or 2 days because we know how the military works with paperwork. It gets lost and shoved down through, they have to have trolls that send it through somewhere. It's got to get restamped. So it may take it a few days, but generally it's a fairly quick process. But let's make sure that we understand this. One of the big issues that exists inside of the Army Body Composition program is people finding a way to cheat in order to get the results that they want, right? So I don't want to have to change any behaviors. I don't want to have to do that. I'm going to find a way to wrap my stomach with Saran wrap with Preparation H underneath and go sit in a sauna for 3 days so that way I sweat everything out and magically I've got just underneath the line so that way I pass. But they cheated in order to get past that line because whenever we say cheated, there was no behavioral change that occurred, correct? The military has, and across all branches, this is true, they have set, across the Army and the Marines, this is true, they have set very high, strict standards on individuals who are flagged for being overweight and come off the program and then go right back on. They have set very high standards on it. They will very much hammer you on if they feel that's something that's happened. And the intent, the spirit of why that is because it's kind of a clear-cut scenario in their mind that you cheated in order to get below that body weight percentage because you didn't really change any behaviors. Because if you had changed the behaviors that caused you to be overweight, then you wouldn't be falling back in the overweight position. I hope I made that clear to you. Right? But with that being said, we're going to be moving on to the next block of instruction to where we're going to be talking about how tapers are actually certified and what are they looking for whenever they go through the process of determining what your BMI is. This is good information for you to have if you have an individual who has to go get taped. If you want to make sure you know what the standards are as people go through this, how it's correctly done. The schoolhouse over here, a lot of people, if they find themselves going to the schoolhouse to go through a course there and they have to get kicked back because they're not within height and weight standards, they end up having to go talk to Sergeant Major about it. So they are very particular and they do a very good job of ensuring that they perform all the steps of the taping process correctly because they don't want it to be questioned, and if it is questioned, they want to be able to answer it smoothly, and every unit should strive to do that. And they do a very good job of being fair, providing counseling, providing people with the needed information they need to be able to move on and move through the process. As you're going through the height and weight screening this is true for I'm going to stick with the Army on this one as we go through it. As you're going through the height and weight process on this, you're going to be required to go through a process of getting weighed and having your height taken at some point. And this was done in the United States Army in summer PTs and in stocking feet, meaning that you won't have any shoes on and you'll be doing this with just your socks on as you're going through this process of them weighing you and going through that. You cannot get weighed in uniform and have an adjustment made because you had to do it in uniform. It does not work that way. Let's point out that the height and weight table that the military currently uses, it is very jacked up. Like the other processes that we were talking about before, it serves the intent, but it is a very inaccurate piece of information, right? The Army does not want you to be at 100 and correction. They don't want you to be at 72 inches and try to make sure that you're underneath of 171 pounds. That's not what they want at all. It's meant to be a quick reference screening table to determine who does not need to be taped at this time. Who do we not need to put through the height and weight process? That's the intent of this, right? That's what they're looking for. It's just a quick guide to be able to go through of who do we know for 100% does not be checked. For the commander to check and know who does not need to be checked. So, and this is also why now we see inside the regulation that it says that it is encouraged that commanders do not perform a height and weight in association with a PT test. It is not a hard no that you cannot do that, but it is strongly encouraged. I know that the command over here, they have it in black and white that they, and I'm also familiar with the National Guard unit over here, they have it in black and white that you will not do a height and weight on the same battle assembly that you do a PT test. They will be separate events. And the reason for this is that they don't want you to be able to starving yourself trying to get underneath weight and whenever you're going through and being poorly fueled for PT tests. So that's why the Army has made sure that there is a separation between the two to where there is there's ample time for you to completely fuel yourself to be able to go through a PT test, right, and to be able to perform your best at it, and then to not be in a situation to where you starve yourself to make sure that you're under 171 pounds whenever you go through. So I hope going through the screening table, stocking feet, for the scales that they will use in order to do this, the way that the scales are verified, there is a line in there in the old one where it says by medical personnel, and it doesn't really say that. Inside, it just says that they have to be accurately scaled every time before the use inside the new one. The way that we have advised people, and this came from one of the other Army Reserve schoolhouses, is the way that they verify the scales. And if you ever want to see them done to make sure, you're more than welcome to do this. It is something that you can request whenever you go through the height and weight process. The way that they're supposed to be zeroed out to ensure that they're on there is that they will have a known weight, like a 25-pound plate or a kettlebell, a set weight of kettlebell. We'll have an individual hold that known weight. They will step on to the scale holding that known weight. So they're stepping onto the scale holding a 25-pound plate. After the weight has completely settled, they will hand over the 25-pound plate, and the scale should correctly reflect that there's been a 25-pound change on what's there, right? That's how they should accurately be done. You can use digital scales within the military in order to gain somebody's weight. That is authorized, but that does also increase the amount of verification that has to occur in order for that scale to be able to utilize. The analog ones with just the floating weights on it, there's much less work that has to be done in order to ensure that they meet the standards of somebody being able to go through the process of getting tested. Checking their height, make sure they're standing flat-footed, some way of tape against the wall, some type of digital system, any one of those, they're going to be tested on it. One important note, whenever you're going through the height and weight screening, whenever you're doing this, it's important to remember that whenever you're going through the height and weight screening, the commander's testing anybody to see who could possibly need to go through a BMI check, right? So all the rounding that occurs whenever you're doing somebody's weight or whenever you're doing their check of their height, this is the simple version that we've always given people in order to be able to remember this, is they will always go to the commander's benefit, right? So if it can cause somebody to be able to go get weight and tape, then it goes to their benefit. The excuse of I passed height and weight table, I wasn't supposed to be taped, that is an invalid excuse. That it holds no real agency to it. The commander can absolutely, it is within their right to say that you are going to go get taped. But they can't do it the other way to where they can say, no, you don't have to get taped. That one doesn't work. But if you go through the height and weight table and it's iffy, you can absolutely go through there and the commander could look at you and say, hey, hardcore, listen, you're a little bit on the line. Let's go ahead and have you go get taped. That is well within their rights to do. But like I said, not the other way. The commander cannot say, no, this individual's not going to get taped. That is completely unauthorized, and in no way can that happen. So that individual's been determined that they do have to go into the height and weight screen, They do have to go have a circumference body test done utilizing a tape to determine what their overall BMI is. Okay? As they go through this process, it generally is recommended that it does occur the same day. as which they went through and done that. One other note, make sure that there is some type of log. The Army does not publish an actual document out there for recording people's height and weight as they're going through a screening table. There's nothing out there that says you have to use this form to write everybody's information down whenever they're going through this. But make sure that if you are at a unit that you have some type of spreadsheet or something to where you're capturing people's information as they're going through. Now, as they move on through the rest of this process, there are required documents that have to be utilized as they're doing that. As somebody goes over to get the circumference measurement tape, which, by the way, is not a bad thing at all, right? There's nothing wrong with being told that you have to go get taped. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Don't let that be a defeated thing. We do not want people, once again, we do not want people trying to starve themselves or get under and try to beat the height and weight tables. That is absolutely not what anybody has ever encouraged. That's not what we want to see happen. Okay? So if an individual is informed that you have to go through the taping procedure, they're going to go over, this should be done in private. It is strongly encouraged that members of the same sex perform the taping. And so if it's males, make sure you have males to do it. If you have females, make sure that you have females to do it. There are occasions where this doesn't occur, to where the commander does have to have males taping a female or vice versa. But make sure that a member or representative of the opposite sex is there to ensure that things are done correctly. Right? This is your professionalism. Drill sergeant saying is that once I can challenge your professionalism, that you lost, right? It's over, done. So don't leave yourself in a position to where you can have your professionalism questioned at it. But the other note I will tell you on that is that there should be a commanding officer who is aware that this male is going to have to go over and tape this female, or vice versa, right? And as long as that is their responsibility to ensure that they're aware that this is having to occur, because maybe there's not enough male or female tapers to ensure that this happens correctly. As they go through the taping procedure, we're going to cover the males first. For the males, they're going to, by the way, we do have slides that occur with all this, right? And we will be putting them up on the little microlink website so people can download them. This is a class that we teach over here. This does not have the test attached to it. If you want the test, just email me. We can email you the test so that way you can have it to go through and be able to teach your unit and certify it. In order to, as you go through for the males, there'll be 2 representatives that are on the individual to ensure that it's performed correctly, and there'll be a 3rd individual present who will be serving as a recorder. The individual who's serving as a recorder does not need to be on a memo certified that they can utilize the tape. The individuals who are performing the tape do need to be certified that they need to be went through a block of instruction, name on a memo that is, the class was done by either a master fitness trainer or a unit fitness NCOIC, somebody who is qualified to be able to teach that this is how you do circumference body measurements. There needs to be somebody who's done that so that way they can verify it. And it's completely within your right to say, can I see the memo for the people who's in here doing the tape? You can absolutely ask for do that. And as we move over to the NCOIC part, you'll be able to see why this is something that does need to occur. So for the males, whenever they walk in, they'll be using, one last thing, how do we verify the tape, that the tape is accurate, right? The easiest way to do it, I have seen units that like to have yardsticks. They'll have a yardstick out there as they go through the process of doing this. They'll have a yardstick so that way you can pull it out. That's a completely authorized way to do it and a very good one to do. The other one that you can do is to take a known distance on it. So we'll take the 10-inch mark and fold it over on the 10-inch mark, and it should be able to, when folded at the 10-inch mark, to have the 0 and the 20 come down to the same area. That's a good sign that the tape hasn't been stretched out over time. They do stretch over time, right? And there's part of our SOP over there is that whenever we get new tapes, we try to get new tapes every 6 months. And whenever we get new tapes, we write the date that tape started being used. So that way, after it's 6 months old, it just gets recycled. So that way we ensure that everybody's being taped with the tape, or utilizing a tape that is not in a worn out condition, right? So for the males, we're going to find the Adam's apple, and we're going to be slightly underneath the Adam's apple. They're going to go around and make sure that around their whole neck, ensuring that they don't grab their traps whenever they're doing that. We want the tape to be parallel to the marching surface, but if making the parallel being underneath the Adam's apple means that we have to catch the top of the neck, we're going to be more worried about not catching the top of the neck than what we are about the tape being parallel to the ground, right? So slightly underneath the Adam's apple, and it has to have a slight cant, so that way we don't catch the upper neck muscles. That's completely acceptable. They're going to call out the reading on it, and prior, whenever we were performing the height and weight tables, we stated that all the rounding goes to the benefit of the commander. Whenever you're going through the circumference measurement, all the rounding goes to the benefit of the soldier, right? So if we're going to be rounding up on the neck, and we're going to be rounding down on the waist, and we're going to be rounding down to the nearest half inch as we're doing this, right? So easy way to remember it, whenever they're going to do the height and weight table, benefit goes to the commander. Whenever they're going through the actual tape process, benefit goes to the soldier, okay? So as they go through, they perform the tape. They're going to be taping their neck 3 times, and they're going to be taping their waist 3 times. They're going to be taping their waist in line with their belly button. So they're going to be put the weight across the belly button, standing up here so we can show you how to do it, right? So they're going to be taking the waist tape right across their belly button. They are going to, it is strongly encouraged that you are neither directly in front of them or directly behind them. Rather, as they put their hands down, that you want to be slightly off or behind where their hand would be out. So I'm pulling the tape tight off to the corner of their stomach, off more to where their glove handles are at. That's where we want to be pulling the tape tight at as we're going through it. Make sure that both these tapes are just pulled slightly snug. That's what it would be. You don't want to over pull or leave it with too much slack in it. But they're going to be in line with the belly button, and it's important that this tape, whenever you're doing the belly button, whenever you're doing the abdominals for male, it will be level to the marching surface. So like we said, we have 2 individuals performing the tape that are there with them as they're doing this. They will ensure that that tape is nice and level and there's no creases or rolled in it as they're going through and doing that. Both these measurements are taken one after another, and they're going to get it 3 times to ensure that they get good accuracy of it. They can raise their hands whenever they're performing their abdominal, but they need to drop them down to the side before they start actually reading off the amount of or whatever the reading is. Also, whatever the individual performing the tape calls out, that is going to be what the individual who is the recorder, that is what they're going to write down. The individual doing the recording is not going to be doing any rounding up or down. If they call out 16 and 3/8, they're going to write down 16 and 3/8. Okay, we will deal with that as after the individuals perform the tape, then we'll go over and do that. Generally, it is best if the individual that is actually holding the tape, making the reading on it, they're the ones that are determining whenever they say 16 and 3/8, if they really mean 16 or they mean 16 and a half, right? That's who should be making the determination as to which one they're going to be moving forward with. So once all that's done, the DA Form 5500, they're going to be putting all that down. They'll be doing the math on it. For the females are going to be taped in 3 different places, right? So very similar to the neck, we're going to be taping them in the middle of the neck, right underneath where the Adam's apple would be. And we will also ensure that we do not catch the top of their upper neck muscles whenever we're doing that. And we would much rather have it have a slight cant to it than we would catch the top of the neck muscles. Then for the next 2 measurements on the female, we're going to be doing their abdominals first, their abs, and we're going to find the point to where it is with the smallest measurement we can across their abdomens, right? So we're not going off the belly button per se as we're doing this. It tends to be slightly higher whenever you're performing that, but we want to find where we can get the smallest measurement across their waist. As we move down to their hips, we want to find the point where we can find the greatest protrusion. So as we do their hips, we're going to be off to the side, and where we can catch, the glutes and the biggest part of their hips, that's where we're trying to get the measurements at. So smallest part across their abs, biggest parts across their abdominals. The other thing that I will tell you that makes a big benefit whenever you're having to tape women in that area is to allow them to put the tape where they want it to be at. And if you need to make some small adjustments after that, that's fine. But as you go to perform the tape, right, have them hold it on this side, right, and then you pull it back across and let them place the tape on their body where they want it at, and then you pull it on tight across. If you need to slightly pull it up or down, and same thing as their hips, allow them to place it where they would tape where they want it at, and then pull it across. And once again, if you need to make some slight adjustments to it, that's fine. But especially for males having to tape females, it's a good practice. That's just a little bit less contact that you have to have, and it represents you being a little bit more professional on it. And there's nothing inside the regulation that says that they can't do that for themselves. But remember that you are still responsible for ensuring that it is done accurately and catching the point to where you are finding the smallest points across their waist and the biggest point across their hips. So females, males, whenever they're taped, they do take off their shirts. Females, they are taped over top of their spandex whenever they're performing this. That's why it's also important that we have members of the same sex in the room, or we try to maintain that as much as we possibly can. So these are the landmarks that the individual performing the tape is looking for. They're then going to be they've recorded all these. If any one of these measurements are over an inch difference, right? So if they measure your waist once and it comes out and it says 33, and they measure it again and it comes out and says 35, that's kind of outside the variance, then we're going to scrap that all three tapes for that. And usually at that point, we also rotate the observer and the taper and have them go through and start performing the actual taping, right? So we just rotate people, throw that whole piece of paper off, and restart for that individual. It's okay that it took another 3 minutes, because it's more important that we waste that 3 minutes, that we get this right moving forward as that individual moves forward. After they have all this, in the previous version of Army Regulation 600-9, it said that you had to be able to pretty much be able to hard write out all the math for how you did this. In the current reading, I believe the date is, I'm pulling off the top of my head, I think it's August 2017, August 2019. It specifically says that you need to use a scientific calculator or the app to determine what their BMI is. The purpose in this is that there was numerous times to where people would do math incorrectly, and we're preventing them from using this device that can be used to very easily determine what their actual BMI is, that can flawlessly be able to do the math. Now, the Army PRT app is the only app that you can utilize. You can use a calculator on your computer, a scientific calculator, in order to perform this. You cannot use any other app in order to be able to go through and plug these in and determine what somebody else's body weight is. These are things that are covered in the block of instruction as we go through and we teach graders we teach people who are taping how to properly do this. We're wrapping up on this part of it, so if you have any questions, go ahead and start putting them in on anything that we just covered. These are part of the class that we teach whenever we do this, is that you will utilize a calculator in order to actually plug this in and be able to figure out what the formula is moving forward to help somebody out, right? To determine what their BMI is. Moving on to the last part of it, it is, are they within or without, or are they within their acceptable tolerance for what their body weight, or for what their height is? It's important to note that in nowhere, whenever they're doing this formula, going through and determining what your BMI is, does your weight play a factor inside of the circumference measurement or the taping process. It matters nowhere, right? So the fact that earlier you weighed 175 pounds whenever you got on the scale, or that this is also why next week, whenever they go to tape you again, the fact that you went from 175 to 170, that really doesn't matter, right? What we want to see is actual measurable changes inside of it. Scales do a very poor job of being able to track body fat loss over the course of time. And like we said earlier, whether it be skin fold or it be tape or it be the bipod and air displacement, those are very accurate at being able to catch the amount of weight that you actually, the amount of body fat that you lose over time. Very inaccurate, all of them, but actually being able to say that you're at 26% body fat. The only way that we can really determine that you're at 26% body fat is through an autopsy, right? That's the only way that we can truly, honestly do that. But if you really did lose 2% body fat, all of those methods will very accurately capture the fact that you did change habits, you were successful in those habits, and that it will accurately catch that because you changed those habits, you have lost 2% body fat. They will all do that very accurately, surprisingly accuracy whenever you do it. So going through, finished up with the graders, the tapers, they performed their tapes. They went through, they filled out the block. They've ensured that the 5500 or the 5500-1 is all filled out correctly, and they've turned it over to the NCOIC. There's two things that we want to stress whenever we talk about the NCOIC as far as them going through and doing this, right? So first, the NCUIC is responsible for ensuring that all the information on that form, whenever they sign on the bottom of it, that all of it has been done correctly. All the math has been done correctly. All the measurements have been done correctly. They're the ones that are responsible. The NCUIC that's signing off on that piece of paperwork should have been in the room whenever all of those individuals were been tested. They're also responsible for ensuring, like we said earlier, if you're going to be taping individuals, there is a block of instruction that you're supposed to go through, and somebody's supposed to be verifying or validating that this individual knows how to correctly perform a circumference measurement on, on the population within the military. That should be there. That NCUIC should, one, have ensured that all of the people that he has there has a memo, and that these people who perform the tape, they were trained and taught to the standard and done it all correctly, right? Those are the two big things on it. One of the most common occurrences that we see whenever we go through an audit, these 5500s and to ensure that they've been done correctly, is whenever they actually went and got the height and weight done, they failed to adjust or go through and remeasure somebody's height whenever they were as they moved through the taping process. Like we said earlier, the fact that your weight does no bearing on the math whenever they're figuring out your BMI. Does not matter at all. Your height does. So as an NCUIC, ensure that there is a tape measure against the wall inside of the room that you're going to be performing the taping at. And if it's a good cue to have to, as people come in and they start recording, they go through the process, they take off, for males, they take off their shirt and their shoes, have them step against the wall and once again record their height, because we want to make sure that we have the correct height as we're going through that process. It's really one of the most common faults that we see as people are going through this whole process from start to finish. And making sure that everybody that you're utilizing in there, whatever, all the non-commissioned officers or leaders that you're using to verify this, they all have the memo that states that they are qualified or certified to be able to perform this. That is also present. That needs to be there. Part of the schoolhouse policy is that this is, if an individual going through the schoolhouse, a student going through the schoolhouse, asks to see the memo, they will support it. They will provide the memo and say, here, this is how you do this, right? Those are the two big things that matter as you're going through the NCUIC, as they sign off and say that this individual is either over or under and needs enrollment inside the Army Body Composition Program. One last note. We'll get to that question. That's a really good question here. That's a really good question. We're going to talk about that one here in just a second. Finish up this last note on it, right? One last note on it. Before any administrative action can occur, so you've had an individual who's went through and they were found to, they were outside of height and weight standards, so they sent them to get taped. They got taped, and they're outside of the BMI check. At this point, like we were talking earlier, they're supposed to be flagged. There's one last thing that has to occur. Before they're flagged, before that commander can take action, there needs to be another team that verifies that this individual is really at the BMI that they are over. So another team of two different graders do need to go through and retape them and ensure that this is where it's at. There is sometimes some slight variance inside of it, but most of the time, teams are pretty accurate at actually being able to capture this. The one note that I will tell you the schoolhouse has put in their SOP that I think everybody should have inside of there, and this is nowhere in black and white doesn't see it. This is why we put it in the SOP, is if the second team comes in and tapes them and says, hey, we know that they were authorized 26 and they were at 27 on this, but whenever we retaped them, they were at 26, then we're going to move forward with the 26, right? They just got a warning shot across the bow. They need to make some changes. Yeah, that's great, but, the second team come in and verified, and they said that they were on 26. So we're going to stay with that number and move forward on it. But that needs to be at the unit level. That needs to be in black and white somewhere. So that way it's clearly stated, because there has been situations to where they have failed, and now it's just kind of an ugly mess that was completely preventable because one team said 26 and over, the other team said 25 and under. So it's strongly encouraged that is in black and white somewhere to provide good guidance if this situation was to ever possibly occur. But before any administrative action can occur, before you're flagged, before any of that goes through and happens, there needs to be another team that retapes and verifies that, yes, this is where they're at. After that has occurred, In active duty and military units, of course, there's going to be a leader sitting down with them to sit down and talk about what's going to happen, the availability of a nutritionist or dietitian, what the PT program is going to be. I hope and pray that, especially on World Mental Health Day, that to stress this, that if they find themselves in that situation, that maybe a mental health professional is also advised that this is what we need to go see. But I hope you see how we took this class full circle to where we started at. What do you do if you have this individual sitting in front of you? How are tapers actually certified and taught how to do it? And how do we go through to the point to where NCOICs are taught what they have to do and go through? We're going to go over the last few questions that we have here, and then we're going to start rounding this up. So let me scroll back up to the top. Is it true that Army height and weight standards is outdated and like 70 years old? Army height and weight standards are based off insurance data taken off white European males. I don't think it's over 70 years old. I think the correct answer is it's data that was collected in the 1970s. While that, yes, that's the truth of it. Also remember, it's just a screening tool. That's all that is, right? It serves no real purpose or validity. It serves no other purpose than just being a screening tool of letting people know whether they could possibly, well, as you were, correction, letting the commander know of who the individuals are who might possibly be at risk of having an excess BMI and needing to adjust and change some of the behaviors that they currently have, even though they did sacrifice to complete missions or career advancement for themselves, right? What was the app for a calculation again? Is it in 600-9? So the only authorized app that can be utilized is the Army PRT app. That's it. Hard stop. If it's not from the United States Army Physical Readiness Training, it's the only one that can be utilized. You can utilize it. All the other custom-made PRT apps that their calculator may be just as accurate as what the other one is. I don't know. The only one that you can use is the Army's PRT app. You can also use a scientific calculator inside of your phone or on your desktop. Either one of those is completely acceptable. Nothing else is. Don't be using a MyFitnessPal app to determine what somebody's body weight is. Okay. With that being said, we're going to start wrapping up this block of instruction. I thank you all very much for joining us. I hope that you have found this educational and have got a lot from it. We will be moving on to, for those of you who don't know, we do these classes every Saturday morning at 6 o'clock here in Hawaii, and we do them every Sunday at 2 o'clock. Next week, we're going to be doing the sprint drag carry. We're going to be covering what is the sprint drag carry, all the parts of it, how to train for it, what you need to do to get better of it. We're going to be going over all those next week during those blocks of times. Are there any exceptions for being out of tape test standard? So there is one, and it is pregnancy, right? If you are a new mom, thank you for being a mom and for growing that belly and baby inside of your belly and giving birth to it. We hope that you and baby are doing great. Currently, the Army says that you have 365 days to be back within height and weight standards to be able to do it. I am a big advocate of moms should also get 90 days of physical therapy. Having to carry a baby is an ordeal. Being a mom is a big job, right? They should be able to go through and have that out there for them to be able to move forward on that, right? But that's generally the only well-known exception that I'm accustomed to. So there is a standing order. It's a good question. A Polynesian male doesn't meet height or tape standards, but gets 300 PT and good at his job. There is a standing order out there from G1 that says, show us these people, right? There's been one or two, there's always exceptions out there to everything. You can't fit everybody into the box perfectly. Army G1 says if you have individuals out there that are maxing the physical fitness test and are outside of the height and weight standards, please let us know. We want to see them, put their name and records on a piece of paper, send it to us. Yes, it has occasionally happened. It is very, very rare. But the military does want to see and know these individuals that can do this because there is a lot to do from it. Remember that the Army has never kicked anybody out. because of height and weight standards. That does not happen. It's because they failure to change. That's what I want to leave with. It's because people failed to change the habits that they developed, and the Army's very thankful for it. Am I allowed to conduct assessment tape? Oh, am I allowed to conduct assessment tape? My ABCs. This is a really, so let's talk about being able to go back and review people who have, I'm going to make the assumption we're talking about people who have been flagged, right? I have a soldier that's been flagged for being overweight, as you were for being outside of BMI, and can I go through and tape them to see where they're at? If you are going to do this on a weekly or regular basis, note, yes, this has to be done every 30 days. The commander has to do this every day, 30 days. The commander needs to assess where they're at on this journey every 30 days. Hard stop at the end of that. Going through to the other part of it, can you do it as an individual and not record this on it? The answer is yes. My recommendation to you is, one, buy tapes on Amazon. Two, to record their measurements at the same time every week, right? So just go ahead and set the rhythm to where, hey, listen, Private Snuffy, every Wednesday after PT at 8:30, you're going to come in and we're going to knock out this tape and see where you're at. I want to point out that since this is a commander's responsibility, you cannot take any administrative action for or against that soldier. But you can do it and track where they're going through and how they're progressing or failing or improving or whatever's happening on it. And that would be very valuable data to a commander, to a command team, to see that, hey, we're working with this soldier, they're slowly making progress, but we are seeing a change in them, they are progressing. Or the vice versa, this guy's not trying. This person's not trying. We're taping it every Wednesday, he's going the other direction, he's showing up for his tape sessions with a cigarette in his mouth. Right? That could be valuable data to it. You can absolutely do it. It's encouraged to do that on a very rhythmic scale because that matters as you're going through and doing that. And don't feel like you need to record it on a 5500 or a 5501. I hope I answered your question. And if not, please send me an email or another message on it, and we'll go through and make sure you got it. Thank you very much.